Good day to you. This is Dr. Dennis Elwood, Senior of Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting. I will restore as well. Coming to you on this, the 10th of August, 2022. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day to be alive, to be well, to be moving in the things of God. And I wanted to just spend this time with you. And what I've recognized, what I've understood is that more and more we are beginning to understand how it is possible that an individual controls and to a great degree continues to control all of their life, the direction that their life goes and what takes place in their life. And they can be intentional about this entire process. And that's the person that we're seeking to reach, the person that we're seeking to talk to have them actually talk with us. And that individual, we've talked about people that we worked with in the past. In the recent past, I've actually had a conversation with an individual in regard to who that person was. And I recognize that in my past, I've had conversations with people who've come out of some very interesting situations in life. I've known people who were involved in, they had been raised, I guess, let me say it this way, in what is called the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And one individual that I became familiar with as far as that particular location, that person had actually gone back. We helped to finance that person's trip to the return trip to the Democratic Republic of the Congo at the time when there was a type of civil war that was going on there in that particular country. And that particular individual went back, and we have pictures of that person actually being in places where they were shooting and all of those kinds of things that were going on in the very location that they were in. And when they went back to that particular location, they were expecting to go there and let's say stay a month. They ended up staying somewhere between 3 to 6 months. I forget exactly when it was that they were there. And then, as I said, there were individuals that I was acquainted with who had also been in places like Liberia and other places like that, and they were there when others were. There were just a lot of things that were going on in that place, and you can be in various places and feel that life will be forever the way that it was at that particular time, but we know that things change, things move on, things don't stay the same. And you remain faithful you remain at the point where you're anchored in the various truths that you know about God, about the universe. And there's some things that do not change. And that's what we seek to say to individuals. We call our 8 A's. One of the things that will help you to anchor yourself in regard to those things that do not change, those things that do not change. And that's what we're seeking to do with individuals. That's one of the reasons that we want to go into more depth with individuals when we say get in contact with us via our email, admin, ADMIN, at rel dash coach, COACH.com. And we share with you various courses, various various instructions, if you want to call it that. And we work with individuals at all kinds of economic levels and everything else in regard to that. And what we seek to do is to say to individuals, like, begin from where you are, and that's every level of where you are spiritually, where you are mentally, where you are relationally, where you are financially. All of those levels, we call it the restore matrix. And we begin from where you are, and then you identify where you want to go as far as life is concerned. And we work with individuals so that they are able to actually look at it and determine uh, if they are making progress, if they are moving forward into their particular dream life and everything like that. And we've got tools that we're able to work with individuals. And one of the greatest tools that we recommend that people use is the tool of spiritual study. Another one is the whole aspect of meditation. There's a tool of affirmation, visioning, all of those kinds of things that people do. And there's a way to do it in such a way that is skillful, and then there's a way to do it in such a way that is unskillful. So we want to encourage people to actually use skillful means in order to grow and in order to transform, in order to evolve, and that entire process. So, but an individual can go. We believe that individuals, people, come to a point where they realize that they are spiritual beings, that they are infinite beings, and that we, when we speak of the biblical account, it speaks of in my Father's house are many mansions, and we speak of those as dimensions of that evolutionary growth that continues long after we leave this particular plane, a level, or dimension of existence, and that it continues every particular culture, every particular place on this earth, this globe, that we are acquainted with, that I am acquainted with, who've ever talked about having to what we call die or a transition or leave this particular plane of existence, have talked about a life after, because they were convinced that something more had to take place. And so they had different descriptions of that particular life, whatever they described it as. The ancient Egyptians talked about it as a life hereafter, and that was one of the reasons they built the pyramids and all of those kinds of things. But they prepared long before they ever died for that afterlife. They prepared long before they ever died. They began pretty much preparation for that from even before birth in regard to that. And so their concerns. There were individuals who used to think, hopefully nobody thinks this now, but used to think when they looked at some of the things that the ancient Egyptians left, that they were dealing with what they called the Book of the Dead. But truthfully, and I've come to learn and understand this, that it wasn't called really the Book of the Dead. It was really the Book of Enlightenment. It had to do with how do you live today. How do you live the days of your life in such a way that when you came to the point that you actually transition or died or face some kind of impending doom, that you could do that in such a way that you were able to actually look at it and not be afraid? Because you had lived a life that was something that you could be proud of, that you know that you had made a difference. It was something that you could be glad about. And so that's what we're talking about there. And the biblical account is something called growing in grace. It is something called becoming the Christ, growing in Christ. The biblical account says, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, or having the mind of Christ. So let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus," which is the same thing. It's talking about growing up. And so that's what we talk about as well. There are many people, but a lot of individuals today, there are many people in the past who actually talked about this entire aspect of just simply being born again. But there's no place in nature that simply talks about being born and not talk about growth. There's no place in nature. You cannot find that in nature anywhere where a seed comes out of the ground and that's it. That does not happen with a tree. That does not happen with a stalk of corn. That does not happen with a flower. It does not happen with any fruit. It does not happen anywhere in nature. It does not happen with any sea animal. It does not happen. where something comes to be born and then it remains, so to speak, a baby. That does not happen. It does not happen anywhere. It does not happen with humans as far as a healthy human person. When they are born physically, they grow. When they are born mentally, they grow. Every individual, when a person has a level of emotions as a child, that grows beyond just simply being emotional at one level. There are levels of growth in every level, dimension of a person's life. And the same thing happens here when it comes to what we call psychological and spiritual growth, or spiritual and psychological growth. And so this is what we talk about in regard to this. So it's not just a matter of the aspect of being born again, it is the aspect of being truly born again and then growing beyond that particular first experience that you have in regard to that. And because God is one, this idea of being born again and is truly born again is called different names in different places. And so, what I've come to do, and what others have come to do, as far as I can tell, is that what they do is that they may use different words in the different domains to talk about the same thing. And I illustrate that by saying that there are four paths up the one pyramid, four paths up the one pyramid, which comes to one point. Four paths, so four different ways up the pyramid. And one of the ways I've seen individuals actually talk about this is to talk about blind men, four blind men, so to speak, seeking to examine a what is that? An elephant, and one has his great trunk, the other one has his great ear, the other one has his great, when I say his trunk, I talk about the nose of the elephant, and then one has his great leg, and one has his great stomach, so to speak. And each one, remember, is blind, and they are describing what the elephant is or what he looks like, but they are blind. So they can only go by what they feel in regard to the elephant. And of course, each one has a partial understanding of what the elephant is. And so it is so often that when we hear and seek to understand, especially from the Christian standpoint, so to speak, that we often hear a partial understanding, arrive at a partial understanding of this thing that is called being a fully developed Christian, if we will, and if we take the traditional sense. And it takes you can take a lifetime, really, I think. And then there's so much beyond that. And that's what I believe that God has us here for, to grow up. And so that is implied in the Bible as we read the Bible more and more. Says the implications of the biblical statement, such as I believe it is the book of Romans, the sixth chapter, something to the statement of, so we all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, short of the glory of God. So our destiny is to be in the glory of God, but we're constantly growing. We're constantly growing. We're constantly growing, becoming more and more and more like our Father, our Heavenly Father. But we're not to despair, because the statement says, now we are the children of God. Now, it's not an if statement. We don't get upset because of the aspect that we are not fully already completely perfect, as we would call it, fully mature. Neither does a parent get upset because their child only took, well, one first step or two first steps, or maybe just learned how to crawl. No parent does that I know of. No parent. Perhaps some cruel parent that has some kind of difficulty, challenges, whatever it may be, may do that, but parents don't usually do that. And so we're talking to individuals in regard to that who want to grow. And wherever it is that they are, they may look around and see various things from their past, various things in their present, various things going on as they look at the future. And they've come to the conclusion that they want to move beyond where they are right now, and they're ready to move forward. And what are some of the things that we can do in regard to helping an individual? One of the first things that we talk about is the 8 A's is this whole aspect of awareness, to become aware. And one of the first things that you deal with when it comes to awareness is this entire aspect of answering the question, who am I? Who am I as an individual? And when we speak of who am I, when dealt with my book, I can send you a PDF copy of the book. Again, the email address is admin at admin at real dash coach.com, and you can send it to info at iwillrestore.org, info at iwillrestore.org, or info at iwillrestore.com. You can send it to either one of those addresses. But my book, I Will Restore, and we dealt with individuals who had been traumatized in various kinds of ways, whether it's physical sexual abuse occurring before the age of puberty, all kinds of things. And this day and time, in the day and time that I wrote the book, which was 2005, I was not dealing with things that people are dealing with today when it comes to sex trafficking, when it comes to modern day slavery and those kinds of things, and all kinds of things that we look at today that I thought were long gone, but today we're still dealing with various things. The idea of white supremacy that we deal with in this day and time, and all of this kind of stuff that we're dealing with, the wars that are going on all over the world, all kinds of trauma that people are dealing with from day to day. The idea of inferiority complexes, all kinds of things, bullying, all of these kinds of things that people are dealing with in regard to that, and the aspect of just feeling that you're not enough. All of those things. That's what we're talking about when it comes to awareness. And the best thing that a person can do when it comes to becoming aware, in my estimation again, is to recognize who you are. You're already a child of God. Already a child of God. When Spirit says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will never leave you or forsake you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Spirit said that before any of us, as far as I know right now, were present on this earth in this physical form that I find myself in. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's what Spirit said. Spirit said, now, a child of God. And God is omnipresent. So God does not know time. God knows us now as God has known us all along. The Bible says that all the days of our lives were written in a book before we had ever lived one day of those lives or these lives, written already in a book. This is in the book of Psalms, 139th division, somewhere around verses 10 through 20. David, when you look at his life and what he was going through and everything like that, he had to constantly reassure himself, reassure through affirmations. And that's what a great many of the Psalms are about. David wrote about 1/3 of the 150 Psalms. About 50 of them are attributed to him because he had to constantly reassure himself of God's care. He said, this I know that God is for me. And that's what we have to do as well. That's what you have to do. That's what I have to do. To reassure ourselves, because there are so many things, whether in our past, whether people around us, there are people who want to be like giants, like Goliath was to David, and they want to thunder down from their positions in society and tell us how small we are, because they look on the outside. And when the Bible tells us, don't look at appearances. Don't focus on appearances, because the things that you see were not made of things that do appear. And what it's telling us is that creation itself, creation, no matter what you see, creation itself, no matter how much money a person has, no matter how much of a house they have, no matter how much land they have, no matter how much what they might consider to be important, it doesn't matter. Creation itself was not made by what you see. Creation is an inside job. That's what it's saying. The first A is awareness, and it's the skillful understanding of that and use of that awareness. What you focus on becomes a fact. What you focus on becomes a fact. And that's the important thing. What keeps grabbing your mind? Is it your past or your future? What keeps grabbing your mind? Is it even your present? Because your present was created by what you focused on before. And the formula that Einstein gave us, E equals mc squared, that formula tells us it's all relative. 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 The making of the atomic bomb at the time when there was no way that the war could be won except by the making of that bomb. It's all relative. It's all relative. It's all relative. And now we're the ones that need to use those tools of how you create by imagination, by calling those things that are not as though they were, because you see them already in the spirit realm. And as they say, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but it does take someone who has a scientific approach to this entire thing, which means that you'll do it over and over and over again until you get it to the point and you get in the community of people who are going to be persistent, just like any other scientist. I was reading where an individual was saying to another individual person says, well, I can't visualize. And they say, I understand you have some kind of genetic defect and everything else. You can't really do that kind of thing. And it wouldn't make sense for you to do it. Like there are people like civil engineers, they don't know how to visualize anything either. But what they do is they go out into the middle of a place that's separated between large mountains and everything like that, and they see a valley. And they what they do is they go and they look at the separation between the two valleys, and they go out and then they measure between one place and another. And they take all these various measurements and just do things like minute measurements between the two valleys, how far down the one side, and then what's down on the floor of the valley, and then they walk across it, drive across it, and everything else, using all kinds of instruments to see from peak to peak and everything else in regard to that. They go through all that, take so many different angles, so many different photographs, if you will, all that kind of stuff. Can you imagine? They have this bridge that is in, I think it's Vietnam, that they have broadcast, haven't been there yet, but they call it an invisible bridge that is between two mountain peaks. And it's, from what I can tell, when you're walking on it, it's like you're walking on air. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine what they had to imagine before they built that bridge? That it was there. Can you imagine just walking on an invisible bridge that has already been built for you to imagine you're walking on it? You don't even have to build it. Now, you can see those mountains as the present state. One of them is your present state, where you are, and the other one is where your new life is, where your dreams are, where all things have come true. What you need to do is walk an invisible path that you can't see from one place to the other. That path is called belief, faith, affirmations, visions, dreams, consistency, meditations, all of those things. You're going to do that path in a skillful way. I mean, you wouldn't want to be stumbling and bumbling across the invisible bridge. For one thing, you mess yourself up. But the other thing is that you may hinder the growth, the movement, the travel of others. This whole aspect. Listen to the Northern Lights for as it plays here. Let me do that just a little bit. Now, I want to say this. I just want to say this in regard to what we're doing. I've gotten into this habit of where I am going to be talking about the people that I work with, that I coach and everything like that. One of those individuals, a young realtor named Chantel Reed Sparrow, actually. And she's not just a realtor. I mean, an excellent realtor. As I said, I'm so proud of her. She's growing and everything like that. And lately, she has gotten a new title. She's called a consultant. And then she showed me some of her work that she's involved with. And it was that she showed online where she was working in another state and she was a consultant in regard to that. And it's a title that the people that she worked with, the company that she works with, uh, gave her. That yeah, she was in another state, other than the state that I know her to be in, and she was consulting about individuals as to how they were to set up and to stage their particular property and everything like that. I mean, she's got great taste. She's a great person and everything like that. And just look up. I guess you can go Google and just look her up. She's a realtor. You could say consultant, but her name is Mrs. Chantel Reed Sparrow, and you can look her up. For I guess for any state, you can work that out with her and everything like that. You'll find her to be a great person. If you're in the Washington metropolitan area, there's a young man who has a barbershop that at one point in the past did not exist other than on paper. We laugh about it. I laugh about it because the aspect that Mr. David Keith Sparrow had like a what we call a 5-page business plan, but he had a dream in his heart that could fill so many pages. And those two individuals had this young man had that 5-page business plan. And today, he had that in his heart. He wanted to be a real estate investor, and then have this barbershop that he had in mind. That was what the 5 pages was about. And today, he is a real estate investor. He is a business person. Well, and when it comes to myself, I've got companies, Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting. We're building that out. with this whole aspect of bringing it forth. And one of the things that we're looking to do is to actually be able to train and hire individuals. We have 4 paths that we work with. So this is kind of commercial for that. We have 4 paths that we work with when it comes to individuals and the coaches that we want to just work with us. We have 4 paths, honestly, to tell you the truth. And one path is what we call, if you want to say traditional, when we're working with people and talking about growing, you can look at, there's a book a long time ago, 1979, I think it was. The book was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was done by an individual named Stephen Covey. Um, Here's another individual to talk about what we call developmental coaching, which is the same thing as what we're talking about, becoming your best self. Or it's called Young, if you want to go very deep. He calls it individuation. It can be called becoming your Christ self when you're dealing with Christianity. You can call it individuation. Abraham Maslow calls it self-realization. All of those, for me, are the same term. So when we talk to people about growing, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about growing, becoming the best version of yourself. And so that's what I'm talking about in regard to that. So that's what we're teaching people because for me, this is like they say, if the airplane is going down and you're all going, the plane is going to crash in the water, and they tell you to put your mask on first before you try to help anybody else. Well, this is putting your mask on first before you try to help anybody. In other words, you become aware first. You become aware first. You don't try to put somebody else's mask on and your mask is off. And they've got all kinds of things in regard to that. So awareness is putting your mask on first. You wake up first. And then the second A is acceptance. And then the third A is assurance. And so all of these things items that are going on when it comes to working with all of this stuff that we're working with as far as a person growing and becoming more and more of their authentic self. And then ultimately, whatever it is called, we call it living your 4D life, and we're talking about abundance. We're talking about being healthy. I had the joy of going to my doctor's. I had to get my blood pressure checked. I had to do a PSA, and they actually told my PSAs went down. I think 0.3% or something to that effect, or 0.3. It went down from 6.4 to 6.1. All because of things that I'm working at, prayers and everything else. And then I have a particular mix that I do in regard to this. So all of those things that we are encouraging you to do as well. But Ms. Keith, David Keith Sparrow, he actually has his barbershop. He actually has his real estate business as well. The two of them work together. We are so proud. We've got someone working on our websites as well. It's another of our coachees that we were working with. And the young lady who's working on our new upcoming website at restore-coach.com, restore, rel-coach, coach.com. We're working on that. Her name, I'll just say that she's working on it and that she's bringing that forth for us. But she decided that she was able to actually work as an entrepreneur. And she decided that she would leave her job and that she would become an entrepreneur, a business owner, and go forth in regard to that. And we're excited about that. We're supportive of that and everything like that. So there are individuals who believe that God lives in them, through them, and as them, and expresses God's self in, through, and as them. So this is what we're talking about. This is not for everybody in the sense of being an entrepreneur. If that's what you're called to do, then that's what you're called to do, and you would be empowered by Spirit to bring that forth in regard to that. So that's what we're talking about. And then you could be a helper for individuals. And that also, we have a spiritual center that we work with. It has been online for a great period of time. We're seeking to bring it forth in both online form. When we speak of online, that's both in regard to the audio, which we're doing now. We're considering the aspect of it being visual or a online presentation as far as the video online and being live streamed and everything like that, because of the aspect that our websites are actually getting and the podcast as well is being well received overseas as well, as we would call it, globally. And so we want to make ourselves available to individuals all over the world, and so on a global basis. And so we're looking for partners when it comes to what we're doing. We'll soon have it so that we'll be able to receive gifts, and then individuals will be able to partner with us, both at our Restore site and then also at our Spirit Victory Praise International Spiritual Center site, and then also those who signed up for coaching. And all of those things will be working together with us because, again, we want to make a very positive difference. Our approach toward the aspect of an individual is that a person has a power within him or herself in order to bring about the change that he or she wants. Is it easy for everybody? No, it's not, because everybody's not in the same situation that he or she is in. But based on the various experiences that people have experienced in history, whether it's in concentration camps, whether it's in war, I've watched. I tell people I've watched. I've watched various shows on television, and there there are shows that talk about disabled veterans, and I'm a veteran, a disabled veteran myself, but I'm not a disabled veteran at the level of the veterans that I've seen. And I just really came to the point of dealing with my own disability. I didn't even know or understand the level of my own disability until recently. And what happened with me, I had shut out the feelings of certain things. So I'm just sharing this with you. Once I let various feelings in, I was watching a movie, and I think there were two. There was a movie called Shooter, I believe it was. And when I saw that movie, um, there's a point of it that I couldn't watch it anymore. I was crying, sick, whatever. And then there was a movie, I think I had seen it before, but maybe not. I don't know. But there's a movie called Full Metal Jacket. And I think after the bathroom scene, I shut that movie off. I have never gone back to see that movie again. Never gone back to see that movie again. I saw another movie where an individual who was a veteran, I don't know if it was a movie or what, um, but he had been wounded to the point that he said his face to the point of his skull and everything else had been like scorched, burned away, whatever it may be. I think he was in a wheelchair. His family stayed by him, everything. I've seen these stories, and I've seen Olympic athletes and on America's Got Talent and everything else that had various accidents and stuff like that. So when we talk about trauma, I don't want to be someone who is cavalier about it. I don't want to be someone who says that any of this is easy or anything like that. And I don't want to say that I've gone through um, something that I haven't. I I just want to help. That's all. I want to do God's will, as Dr. King would say. That's all. I want to help as best I can. I don't have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination. I I'm still to a great degree a learner in this. I believe the Bible. I believe that there's an experience of spirit that is open, available to every individual, and that God has an experience for even those people that I've just mentioned. I know that I've had an experience with God. I know that I'm thankful and I'm grateful, and that in spite of whatever false narratives there are, or what is considered by some and not by others to be false narratives, there is a truth, capital TRUTH, with all caps, if you will, about God that I have experienced in life. And that whether you call it the path of spirituality, whether you call it the path of psychology, whether you call it the path of the stories that are told and how they are told, we work with all of those to reach any person and every person that comes to us. And we've had real success in doing this. And so we reach out to you in the intent that you would reach out to us, because we have benefited more than the people that we've mentioned and more times that we've mentioned. Yes, I have been in the hospital room with people that they had said were going to die and seen them get up and leave their hospital rooms. There's no question about that. I have been with individuals that the doctor gave certain times to live, and those people have lived for decades longer. I know this to be true. I know what it is to be bullied, to be hurt, to be wounded, to be cast aside. I know what the text says when it says the stone that the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. I know what that is. So I know that God is real. I know what it is to be both rejected. I know what it is to be celebrated. I know when I went to Agape International Spiritual Center, after a time when I was hurt and wounded and everything else, that I saw a man named Dr. Mike Bernard Beckwith who just jumped up at the middle of my presentation and said, "Do you know that these people are loving you right now?" And he stunned me. He surprised me, but he has never wavered in his belief and support of Dr. Dennis L. Waters Sr. I love him, appreciate him, agape him, which is Agape International Spiritual Center, and not just him, but the people of agape. Unconditional love is what agape means. I know that individuals who have supplied me with all kinds of tools, whether they are individuals like one of my teachers, Dr. Will Coleman, individuals like my late dissertation chair at Howard University School of Divinity, the eminent Dr. Kane Hofelder, all of these individuals have poured into my life, and I just simply want to honor them, thank God for them. There are others, the Sheila McKeithen, Mayor Tompkins, who has passed. I just want to honor them, and I don't want to in any kind of way hide my light in any kind of way under any bushel whatsoever. So as far as God will take us, that's where we're going. That's why we're going. I've done a study of a book that was written by an individual a long time ago. It is called the Steps of Christ Study Workbook. It is an outstanding study. I still have that study and I still read that book because I believe that there are many paths up the mountaintop. I want to study with you that book because I believe it can be placed right beside other books, such as the Spiritual Liberation book by Dr. Beckwith, such as the Lessons in Truth book by H. Emily Cady, that they could all be studied together. I believe God is one. He speaks different languages, you know. He will even put on different skin color, if you will, you know. He shows up in different spiritual traditions, you know. He has different names, you know. Universal God, universal mind, universal. Nobody can close in an omnipresent God, a universal God. No one can say they have a private God. Not the God that we serve, who is omnipresence, omniscient, omnipotency, omniactive. And so that's the God that I serve. That's the God that loves me and whom I love and who expresses itself in, through, and as me. That God. And so I know that that God is revealed in the Bible, and I know that that God is revealed in the Bhagavad Gita. I know that that God is revealed in the Quran, in every holy book, spiritual book, true spiritual book. God is there. In writings of poets all down through history, God is there. We have a university. We teach. Why? Because there will come a time that we will study war no more. There will come a time, not simply when we all go to heaven. It'll be heaven here on this earth. We study war no more. As a matter of fact, I think it's be pretty much wrong for Spirit to allow us to go somewhere else if we can't make peace on this earth between ourselves. Why would you let immature children go anywhere else outside of this earth when we can't get along on the earth with one another? Makes no sense to me. So, wow, you keep leaving it here, they kill each other. Well, if we are just that ignorant that we get to the point that we kill each other and just wipe each other out, now that's real ignorance. And anybody that think that we can live without others, that's real ignorance. Anybody who thinks that we can just dominate others, that's real ignorance. It cannot happen. We all lose. We all lose. We all lose. Our best bet. Our best bet. That's why America is our best bet. That's why democracy is our best bet, is to get along. Our best bet is to get along. That's not political. That's social. We're all on the same planet. We're all here. And no matter what the geography says, we're all here. We're eating food from one place, driving cars from every place, getting minerals from every place, stealing from each other, whatever we might call that. We got computers from everywhere. We let machines outdo us. I think God should wait. until God inside of us discovers what the machines know about working together. I think that's why we're seeing planes or vehicles or crafts that fly at Mach 5 to 20 in our airspace. So that's what I'm about, is building a community of people, global. Yes, it costs money, or doesn't. You have to invest in whatever it is that you want the future to be. I would rather have God just simply give it all to me so that I don't have to request it or desire it from anybody. I would rather. I've cried about that, prayed about it, wanted to win the lottery, the $1.6 billion or whatever it was. I wanted all of that. Didn't happen. So I look at it, and as I say, that it's just amazing. I will end by simply saying that there was a time in my life that I had certain prayers, and what happened for me was that my prayers were answered. They were really answered. They were answered. I'm eternally grateful, eternally indebted to God. If not every prayer, I don't know what's missing or anything like that. I could just keep demanding and demanding and demanding of God. I had a professor that said, I've seen God do so much with so little for so long. I'm now convinced that God can do anything with nothing, meaning me. It's the same thing that Jesus said, without God, I can do nothing. And so what I want to do is just glorify God, express God. I hope that's your desire as well. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added. Everything's added after that, and that's where I am now. Everything added. Why? Because look around, listen, feel what's going on in the world. I will end by saying that there was a man named, I think it was Dennis Waitley, who had in his book Seeds of Greatness, I believe, a long time ago, and it said in one chapter that the man was walking along the seashore, and a storm had come up, and it had blown, the wave had come in and left a lot of starfish that were on the shore. And the man was walking along, and he picked up one starfish, and there were like thousands of them on the shore, and he just picked up one and threw it into the ocean again. Another man walked by and said, "What's the use? You're not, you can't save them all. It's useless for you to just pick up one and throw it in there. You're not making any difference." And the man that was walking along, picking them up, he just bent down and picked up another one and threw it into the ocean. And he said, "I made the difference for that one." The two people that I mentioned earlier, I know I've made a difference in their lives. I saw them a few years ago. I see them now. There are others, the same thing. I know that individuals' lives have been changed as a result of my ministry and everything else. I'm clear about that. I know that the truth that I'm saying about God, capital T, capital R, capital U, capital T, capital H, that I'm speaking about God, even if a person does not initially get it. Truth is truth today, tomorrow. My professor would say from time to time, he says, after I preach next week, you'll be doing cartwheels on the campus of the school because it'll finally hit you, what I just said. My mother and father would say little statements, little pitty little statements. Took me a long time to actually understand that they weren't talking about physical things. A stitch in time saves nine. 9 times return. Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. 16 times return. All of those things and more. And then I've seen people who didn't listen. My parents would say, you make your bed hard, you have to lie in it. Bible says you reap what you sow. So does a reformer. So you work with those who will work with you. But all of us, at some point, don't get to complain anymore about how life is hard. Life is a set of choices. That's it. Especially today, more and more, get choices. It can be as simple as change the channel on your television, listening to a radio broadcast or a podcast. Yes, you got to make choices. Just like your subconscious mind has to determine what picture it's going to bring up, whether it's going to be something that's good for you or bad for you, and it's got to do it within a microsecond, a nanosecond. It has to make that decision, and you have to program it perhaps years in advance to make that decision. That's why we're talking to you now. It doesn't happen. It's not one thing. It's not one moment. It takes time. Nobody's fault. Don't lay the blame on anybody. No matter how fault worthy you may think they are. It's your life. That's what we tell people. Blame no one. Take control of your life right now. Admin, ADMIN, at real, REL, dash coach. I don't care where you are in the world. No matter what your financial situation may be, emotional situation may be, mental situation may be, if you can write, if you can type, if you can do anything, get someone to do it for you. Put in there, I just want to know. That's subject, I just want to know. We'll only have, opportunity to serve a certain number of people anyway. Just put in there, I just want to know. I'm going to say, take care. God bless you. Looking forward to hearing from you. Here's a little bit more Northern Lights.